There is a conflict happening right now, tonight, in the wild places of the world that most nature documentaries have never bothered to film. It does not involve lions. It does not involve wolves and bears. It does not involve the dramatic, telegenic predator matchups that fill streaming platforms and magazine covers. It involves two animals that most people think live on completely different continents, in completely different ecosystems, having absolutely nothing to do with one another. And yet there are places on this earth where wolves and hyenas share the same ground, compete for the same food, challenge each other for the same territories, and have been doing so for so long and with such intensity that both animals carry the evolutionary marks of that conflict in their bodies and their behavior today. And almost no one talks about it. Subscribe right now if you want to understand the natural world the way it actually works, not the simplified, cleaned-up version you get from a 2-minute highlight reel, but the real thing, the complicated thing, the version that makes you reconsider everything you thought you knew about predators and competition and the brutal intelligence of wild animals. Let's go. The first thing we need to do is collapse a geography. Because the assumption that wolves belong to the north, to the forests of Europe and the tundra of Russia and the mountains of North America, while hyenas belong to the south, to the savannas of sub-Saharan Africa and the open grasslands below the Sahara, is not wrong exactly, but it is dangerously incomplete. It is the kind of half-truth that feels like a full one until you actually start looking at maps and fossil records and the distribution of both species across their full historical range. Wolves, Canis lupus in one subspecies or another, once had the largest natural range of any land mammal on Earth. They were everywhere. They were in North America from the Arctic to Mexico. They were across Europe from the Iberian Peninsula to Scandinavia. They were in the Middle East, in Central Asia, in the Indian subcontinent. And they were, crucially, in large parts of the African continent, at least in the north, and across a vast band of territory that we today call the Middle East and the Near East, countries and regions where the geography is not European North and not African South but something else entirely, a complex, transitional, biogeographically rich zone where species from multiple biomes converge and in some cases directly compete. Hyenas, meanwhile, are not solely African animals either, and the history of the family Hyenidae is a history of enormous geographic range that modern people have almost entirely forgotten. The family first evolved in Eurasia, not Africa. Hyena fossils have been found across Europe, across Asia, in places where no one today would think to look for them. The cave hyena, Crocuta spelea, a now extinct subspecies of the spotted hyena, ranged across Eurasia from Spain to Siberia during the Pleistocene epoch and was a major predator and scavenger on a landscape that also included wolves, and where the two species competed directly and continuously for the carcasses and prey animals of an Ice Age world. The three surviving hyena species today, the spotted hyena, the striped hyena, and the brown hyena, have contracted from that enormous ancient range, but one of them has not contracted nearly as much as most people realize. The striped hyena, is the ghost at the center of this story. It is smaller than the spotted hyena and far less famous. It does not have the extraordinary social structure of spotted hyena clans, the matriarchal hierarchies, the cooperative hunting, the terrifying laugh that has made Crocuta the hyena of popular imagination. The striped hyena is quieter, more solitary, more nocturnal, more shy. It does not make documentary filmmakers reach for their cameras the way a spotted hyena clan pulling down a wildebeest does, but it ranges across an area that makes it one of the most geographically significant carnivores in the world. The striped hyena lives in North Africa, in the Sahel, across the Middle East, through the Arabian Peninsula into Turkey, through Iran, into Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. It shares its range with wolves in multiple countries across multiple continents. And in some of those places, the competition between these two animals is not historical. It is not a matter of fossil records and Pleistocene reconstructions. It is happening right now. The country where this conflict is most visible, most documented, and most illuminating is Iran. And to understand why, you need to understand Iran as a landscape rather than as a political entity, because the politics have almost nothing to do with what makes this country one of the most remarkable places for wildlife overlap in the world. Iran is a country of extraordinary geographic diversity. It has coastline on the Caspian Sea in the north and on the Persian Gulf and Gulf of Oman in the south. It has mountains, Sirius Mountains, the Alborz range along the Caspian coast and the Zagros running down the western spine of the country, with peaks that exceed 4,000 meters and alpine ecosystems that feel like they belong in Switzerland or Norway. It has dense, ancient temperate forests on the northern slopes of the Alborz, receiving Caspian moisture in quantities that would surprise anyone who assumes Iran means desert. It has the Dashti Kavir and the Dashti Lut, two of the most extreme hot deserts on the planet, in its central and southeastern interior. And it has vast areas of semi-arid steppe, rocky scrubland, and transitional habitat that are neither forest nor desert but something in between. This geographic complexity means that Iran is home to an astonishing variety of wildlife: Persian leopards, Asiatic cheetahs critically endangered and found almost nowhere else on Earth, ibex and Urial sheep on the mountain slopes, gazelles on the plains, wild boar in the forests, brown bears in the higher elevations, and both wolves and striped hyenas distributed across overlapping ranges in a way that puts them in direct, ongoing competition across a huge portion of the country. The wolves of Iran are Persian wolves, Canis lupus palps, a subspecies also found across the Middle East and into South Asia, slightly smaller and leaner than the gray wolves of Europe and North America, built for a landscape of hot summers and rocky terrain rather than for the snow and boreal forest of northern latitudes. They are social hunters, running in packs of 5 to 15 individuals with the tight family structure and cooperative hunting strategies that define wolf social organization worldwide. They hunt wild ungulates where those are available, gazelles, wild sheep, wild boar, ibex, but they are also highly adaptable and will take domestic livestock and raid agricultural areas when wild prey is scarce, which brings them into conflict with humans in ways that have placed enormous pressure on wolf populations across the Middle East and Central Asia. The striped hyenas of Iran are, in contrast to their spotted cousins, largely solitary foragers. They are not cooperative hunters in the same way wolves are. They are primarily scavengers and opportunistic hunters of small to medium prey, though they are larger and more powerful than most people imagine, capable of cracking bones that would defeat most other carnivores, and capable of taking prey considerably larger than themselves when opportunity presents. They are also, and this is something that is rarely emphasized in popular accounts of the species, highly intelligent, with problem-solving abilities and memory capacities that reflect a lineage of intense competition with other intelligent, adaptable carnivores. You do not evolve a large, complex brain in a landscape of plenty. You evolve it in a landscape of competition and scarcity. And the landscape they share in Iran is frequently one of competition and scarcity. The mountains and semi-arid uplands of provinces like Fars, Isfahan, Yazd, Kerman, Semnan, and others across the country's interior are exactly the kind of habitat where both species are present and where the ecological overlap is significant. Both animals are primarily nocturnal or crepuscular in these landscapes, active at night and in the hours around dawn and dusk. Both are opportunistic and will take whatever protein is available. Both are sufficiently generalist to survive in habitat that would not support more specialized predators. And both, critically, require sufficient territory to maintain a functioning population, territory that in a country where human agricultural expansion and grazing pressure has been squeezing wild habitat for decades, is increasingly hard to come by. The territory war, and that is exactly what it is not fought with the dramatic confrontations that characterize competition between, say, lions and hyenas on the African savanna. It is more subtle than that, and in some ways more interesting because the subtlety reveals the intelligence of both animals. It is fought in the language of scent and sound and avoidance and resource monopolization, with occasional direct confrontations that are violent enough to settle questions of dominance and discourage future challenges. Wolves communicate territorial boundaries primarily through scent marking and howling. A pack's territory is defined by a dense network of scent marks, deposited at regular intervals along travel routes, at prominent landmarks, at the edges of core areas, everywhere that a rival needs to understand that this ground is claimed and defended. The howling serves a dual function, coordinating pack members within the territory and broadcasting the pack's presence and strength to any potential rivals within earshot. A pack that howls together regularly is a pack that is announcing its cohesion, its collective strength, its willingness to defend. It is a sound that carries for kilometers across mountain terrain and is designed to carry that far. Striped hyenas communicate territory through scent as well, using a combination of urine, feces, and secretions from their anal glands that are deposited on prominent objects throughout their range. They are less vocal than spotted hyenas and considerably less vocal than wolves, but they are not silent. They produce a range of calls including a distinctive laugh that is quite different from the spotted hyena's more famous vocalization, and they use these calls in contexts of threat and confrontation and communication with other hyenas. What happens when these two marking systems overlap in the same landscape is something that researchers studying carnivore ecology in Iran and elsewhere in the Middle East have been working to understand for decades, and what they are finding is that the relationship is more dynamic and more complex than a simple territorial divide would suggest. The two species do not simply carve the landscape into hyena zones and wolf zones and leave each other alone. The interaction is more fluid, more seasonal, more dependent on the specific distribution of prey and water and human activity at any given time and place. And within that fluid interaction, there are patterns that reveal things about both species that are genuinely surprising. One of the most important patterns is what carnivore ecologists call temporal partitioning, combined with spatial avoidance. In areas where wolves and striped hyenas overlap in Iran, research using camera traps and GPS tracking collars has found that the two species often use the same specific locations, the same water sources, the same carcasses, the same movement corridors, but at different times. Where wolves are active at a particular site, hyenas will often be absent. Where hyenas are recorded moving through an area, wolves may avoid that exact corridor for a period afterward. They are reading each other's scent calendars, essentially using the chemical information left by the other species to schedule their own movements in ways that minimize direct confrontation. This kind of temporal avoidance is itself an indication of how seriously both species take the risk of direct conflict. Avoidance behavior is costly. If a hyena knows that a wolf pack uses a particular water source but avoids that source during peak wolf activity hours, the hyena is incurring a real cost, sometimes traveling further to find alternative water, sometimes going without in ways that accumulate as physiological stress over time. Animals do not pay those costs unless the alternative, direct confrontation with a wolf pack represents an even higher cost. The behavior reveals the danger both animals perceive in the other. And the danger is real and documented. Direct confrontations between wolf packs and individual striped hyenas have been recorded and studied across the range where the two species overlap, and the outcomes are instructive. A lone hyena confronting a full wolf pack is in serious trouble. Wolves are coordinated, fast, and collectively aggressive in ways that a solitary animal of any species struggles to counter. Individual wolves are roughly similar in size to striped hyenas, with adult wolves in Iran ranging from about 20 to 40 kilograms and striped hyenas ranging from about 26 to 41 kilograms, meaning neither species has a simple size advantage. But a pack of 5 to 10 wolves represents a collective mass and a coordinated attacking capability that a single hyena cannot match, and the behavioral evidence suggests that hyenas know this. However, the hyena is not helpless in these confrontations, and the relationship is not simply one of wolf dominance with hyenas as the subordinate species that perpetually retreats. The striped hyena has physical weaponry that commands respect. Its jaws are among the most powerful relative to body size of any carnivore in its range, capable of generating bite forces that can crush large bones and that can inflict serious damage on an attacking wolf. Its hide is thick. It has a mane of long hair along the dorsal ridge that, when raised, increases the apparent size of the animal significantly, a visual threat display that almost certainly evolved in response to exactly this kind of confrontation situation. And it has the stamina and pain tolerance of an animal that evolved in landscapes of intense competition. A hyena that decides to stand and fight rather than flee is a serious opponent, even for multiple wolves. The critical variable is the number. When a single wolf encounters a single striped hyena, the outcome is genuinely unpredictable and depends on the specific individuals, their age, health, experience, and motivation. Documented encounters between lone wolves and striped hyenas have gone both ways, with both species recorded as winners in different encounters, and with outcomes that sometimes involved serious injury to both parties. The wolf tends to have advantages of speed and maneuverability. The hyena tends to have advantages of jaw strength and physical resilience. When the match is one-on-one, it is genuinely competitive. When the pack is involved, the balance shifts. A pack of wolves pursuing a hyena is a different proposition than a single wolf. The coordinated attack, with wolves approaching from multiple angles, taking turns rushing in and retreating, attempting to wear the hyena down or isolate it, represents a tactical sophistication that a lone animal struggles to counter. But even in pack confrontations, the evidence suggests that wolves do not routinely kill hyenas, they displace them. The goal seems to be territorial exclusion rather than elimination, driving the competitor off rather than consuming the metabolic cost and the injury risk of a fight to the death. And striped hyenas, for their part, are not simply the inferior competitor in all contexts. In certain conditions and certain landscapes, the hyena holds significant competitive advantages over wolves. And understanding those advantages requires understanding something fundamental about the ecological strategies of the two animals, strategies that evolved in different contexts and that bring different tools to the competition. Wolves are optimized for hunting. Their entire evolutionary architecture, the long legs, the deep chest, the coordinated social hunting behavior, the communication systems, the territory maintenance, all of it is organized around the problem of pursuing, capturing, and killing large prey animals. Wolf pack hunting is one of the most sophisticated cooperative endeavors in the animal kingdom, with individual animals playing coordinated roles in herding, cutting off, chasing, and finally taking down prey animals that are often considerably larger than any individual wolf. The social structure of the pack, with its dominance hierarchies and pair bonds and subordinate roles, exists largely in service of this hunting function. Wolves are, in an evolutionary sense, machines for killing large things cooperatively, and everything about them reflects that specialization. Striped hyenas are optimized for survival in harsh, unpredictable environments with highly variable food availability. They are generalist foragers of extraordinary capability. They can digest materials that most other carnivores cannot touch, bones that are practically mineral rotting carcasses with bacterial loads that would kill other species, plant material in the form of fruit and tubers, and roots when animal food is scarce. Their digestive system is a marvel of evolutionary engineering, including a stomach with exceptional acid concentration for dealing with pathogens, a gut microbiome apparently adapted to processing material that would be toxic to most mammals, and bone-crushing jaw mechanics that allow them to access the nutrient-rich marrow inside bones that other carnivores leave behind. A striped hyena in a landscape without large prey can still find enough food to survive. A wolf pack in the same landscape cannot. This difference in ecological strategy becomes crucial in arid and semi-arid environments, which is precisely the habitat where wolves and striped hyenas most commonly overlap in Iran and elsewhere across their shared range. In productive mountain habitat with abundant wild ungulates, wolves have the advantage. They can hunt effectively, maintain their pack cohesion and social structure on the back of regular large prey kills, and their territorial aggression can effectively exclude the less socially organized hyenas from the best areas. But in drier, less productive habitat where large prey is sparse and unpredictable, the hyena's generalist scavenging strategy begins to outcompete the wolf's hunting specialization. A lone hyena with a hyena's dietary flexibility can persist and even thrive in conditions that would fragment and eventually destroy a wolf pack. This creates a pattern across the landscape that is not quite what you would expect if you imagined a simple territorial war with clear winners and losers. The wolves hold the productive core habitats, the mountain uplands where wild sheep and ibex are available, the riparian corridors where prey animals concentrate around water. The hyenas hold the margins, the dry rocky terrain between the mountains and the true desert, the areas around human settlements where livestock mortality and refuse provide a reliable if low-quality food base, the transitional zones where the prey base is too sparse and unpredictable to support a wolf pack but sufficient to support a solitary generalist. And between these zones, in the transitional areas where productive habitat grades into marginal habitat, the two species are in active competition with the outcome varying seasonally, year by year, depending on prey abundance, water availability, human disturbance, and the specific history of the individuals and groups involved. The food overlap between wolves and striped hyenas in Iran is particularly interesting because it occurs at multiple levels of the food chain simultaneously. Both species will take the same wild ungulates when they can. Both will scavenge the same carcasses when they encounter them. Both will take domestic livestock when the opportunity presents. And both will interact with the same human communities in the same landscapes in ways that bring them into conflict with people and therefore with each other indirectly. As the pressure from human activity, lethal control, habitat loss, retaliatory killings, changes the distribution and abundance of both species in ways that reshape their competitive relationship. The carcass question is central to understanding the intensity of the competition. In landscapes where large predators have been reduced or eliminated, and Iran has seen substantial pressure on its large predator populations from centuries of hunting, habitat loss, and human-wildlife conflict, the availability of wild ungulate carcasses depends largely on what survives of the natural mortality of ungulate populations. Deaths from starvation, disease, extreme weather, falls in rough terrain. These are not unlimited in number, and each one represents a significant food resource that both wolves and hyenas want. A carcass in the mountains of Iran can be worth days of metabolic income for either species, and the competition to access and monopolize carcasses is fierce. Camera trap studies in areas of Iran where both species are present have captured interactions at carcasses that reveal the behavioral complexity of this competition in vivid detail. A wolf pack at a carcass is a formidable monopolist. The pack feeds communally and defends the resource aggressively, with subordinate wolves eating rapidly in the time they have access and dominant animals eating first and longest. A hyena that attempts to approach a carcass being fed on by a wolf pack is taking a significant risk. And the camera trap footage shows that hyenas are well aware of this, typically approaching only after they have spent considerable time at a distance, assessing the number of wolves present, their behavior, the degree to which they are focused on feeding versus alert to the surroundings. What is fascinating in this footage is the sophistication of the hyena assessment behavior. This is not a simple approach and retreat. It is a systematic information-gathering process that can take an hour or more. The hyena circles the site at a distance, using wind direction to maximize the scent information it can gather. It observes the posture and activity level of individual wolves. It may approach and retreat multiple times, each approach getting slightly closer, calibrating the risk at each step. And its ultimate decision about whether to attempt to access the carcass, to wait until the wolves are finished, or to abandon the site entirely, appears to be based on a genuine assessment of pack size, hunger level, and individual wolf behavior that is cognitively impressive. The wolves, for their part, show awareness of the hyena's presence long before any direct confrontation. Individual wolves will stop feeding and orient toward the hyena's location, adopting alert postures that signal threat recognition. In packs with established experience of hyena competition, the response to hyena presence at a carcass site is often organized, with one or two wolves actively patrolling the periphery while others continue to feed, a division of labor that reflects the pack's sophisticated response to a competitor it has learned to take seriously. What sometimes follows is one of the most remarkable competitive behaviors in the carnivore world of the Middle East. A single bold hyena, or occasionally a pair of hyenas if they happen to be traveling together, which is less common in striped hyenas than in spotted hyenas but not unheard of, will execute a kind of harassment strategy against the wolf pack at the carcass that leverages the hyena's physical resilience and pain tolerance in a way that is genuinely remarkable to observe. The hyena will approach close enough to provoke an attack, absorb the initial wolf rush with its thick hide and powerful body, then back off just enough to reset, drawing wolves away from the carcass in pursuit, then reveering direction as the pursuing wolves turn back. The goal, in a functional sense, is to disrupt the feeding and scatter the pack's attention enough to allow access, not continuous access, not the whole carcass, but enough, a few minutes here, a few minutes there, enough to fill a stomach with the marrow-rich bones and the nutrient-dense organ material. This strategy does not always work. Sometimes the pack is simply too large, too cohesive, and too aggressive for even the most persistent hyena to penetrate. But it works often enough that it has been observed and documented multiple times across different sites and different researchers, suggesting it is a learned strategy, possibly one that is transmitted between hyenas that encounter each other, or one that individual hyenas have independently arrived at because it is the logically available response to the competitive situation they face. And here is where the evolutionary dimension of this relationship becomes genuinely profound. The behaviors we are describing, the pack's organized perimeter defense, the hyena's systematic risk assessment and harassment strategy, the temporal partitioning that allows both species to use the same landscape, the physical weaponry of thick hide and powerful jaws on one side and coordinated pack aggression on the other, these are not accidental. They are the product of millions of years of coevolutionary pressure, each species' adaptations shaped in part by the competition with the other. The wolf pack's size and coordination is in part a response to competition with large, powerful scavengers. The hyena's extraordinary digestive capabilities and bone-cracking dentition are in part responses to the need to access food sources that have already been worked over by pack hunters. They have been making each other what they are for longer than our entire species has existed. The fossil record of this relationship is extraordinary and almost completely unknown outside of specialist paleontology circles. During the late Pleistocene, in the period between roughly 50,000 and 10,000 years ago, wolves and spotted hyenas, not striped hyenas but the larger, more aggressive crocuta, coexisted across a vast Eurasian range that included much of Europe and the Middle East. And the archaeological evidence from cave sites across this range tells a story of intense and sustained competition over a very long time. There are European cave sites where the alternating presence of wolf and hyena remains, accumulated over thousands of years, reflects what paleontologists describe as a temporal use pattern, the same sites occupied by each species in different periods, with the direct competition between them apparently regulating which species use the site at any given time. The Cave of Fouvent in France, the Kent's Cavern in England, numerous German and Central European sites all show this pattern of alternating occupation. Hyena dens that became wolf dens that became hyena dens again, the layers of bone accumulation reflecting the ebb and flow of competitive dominance across centuries and millennia. and the prey items found in these sites tell their own story. Both species were hunting and scavenging the same animals: the woolly rhinoceros, the woolly mammoth in its earlier layers, the aurochs, the horse, the bison, the reindeer. The same meat, the same territory, the same competitive pressure, sustained over timescales that dwarf all of recorded human history. The spotted hyena eventually disappeared from Eurasia as the megafauna it depended on went extinct at the end of the Pleistocene, a combination of climate change and almost certainly the pressure of expanding human hunters. The wolf survived partly because of its greater behavioral flexibility, its ability to shift prey targets, its adaptability to a wider range of habitats, and eventually its capacity to form a relationship with humans. But the competitive architecture, the behavioral systems, the physical adaptations, all of the evolutionary engineering that developed in response to millions of years of coevolution with large hyenas remained in the wolf, baked into its behavioral repertoire and its social structure. The striped hyena, smaller and less specialized than the spotted hyena and thus less dependent on the megafauna that vanished, survived across a range that still brings it into contact with wolves in Iran, the Middle East, Turkey, and parts of South Asia, and the competitive relationship continues in these landscapes with all of the ancestral intensity of a conflict that began long before the pyramids were built. In India, the relationship between Indian wolves, Canis lupus palpalis, and striped hyenas, hyena, takes on additional dimensions that have been studied in the Deccan Plateau and in the arid and semi-arid regions of Rajasthan and Gujarat. The prey base here is different from Iran: gazelles and blackbuck and smaller ungulates replacing the wild sheep and ibex of the Iranian mountains, and the human landscape is different, with dense human populations and long histories of livestock herding that have shaped both species' behavior for centuries. But the competitive patterns are recognizable. Wolves dominate in areas of higher prey density and more intact habitat. Hyenas persist in the degraded margins. Both compete intensively for livestock kills and natural carcasses. And the same behaviors, temporal partitioning, scent-based territorial signaling, direct confrontation at carcasses, appear in their Indian expression as their Iranian and Middle Eastern expression. In Israel and Jordan, in the Negev Desert and the Jordanian steppe, researchers have been tracking the relationship between small wolf packs and striped hyenas in landscapes that are heavily modified by human activity, and where both species are under significant pressure from persecution and habitat loss. The studies from these regions have contributed some of the most detailed behavioral data on the competitive relationship, because the relatively open terrain of the Negev and the Jordanian steppe makes observation easier than in the dense mountain terrain of Iran. And what these studies reveal is a competitive relationship that is exquisitely sensitive to the human landscape, with the relative success of each species shifting in response to patterns of human settlement, agricultural activity, refuse availability, and the presence or absence of active persecution. In areas where wolves have been reduced in number by persecution, hyena populations sometimes expand to fill the competitive vacuum, taking over territories and food resources that were previously dominated by wolf packs. In areas where hyena populations have been suppressed by poisoning or trapping, wolf packs sometimes expand into habitats they would not normally prioritize. The two species regulate each other's populations through competitive pressure in ways that interact with human management decisions to produce outcomes that neither human managers nor the animals themselves would experience in isolation. This interconnection, this mutually regulatory relationship between two competing carnivore species, is something that wildlife managers and conservationists in the regions where both animals live are increasingly recognizing as important for understanding how carnivore communities function. In the past, the tendency has been to manage each species in isolation, setting conservation priorities and harvest limits and conflict management strategies for wolves independently of what is happening with hyenas, and vice versa. But the ecological evidence increasingly suggests that this is like trying to understand a market by studying only the buyers and ignoring the sellers. The two species are part of the same system, and actions affecting one affect the other in ways that ripple through the entire predator community and cascade down into prey populations and the vegetation that those prey populations manage through their grazing. The wolves of Iran are classified as endangered at the national level, with population estimates that range from a few hundred to perhaps 2,000 individuals scattered across the country in fragmented populations with varying degrees of connectivity. The pressures on them are substantial. Retaliatory killing by livestock herders is the primary driver of wolf mortality across most of their Iranian range, with individual wolves and entire packs killed in response to livestock depredations that are themselves often a response to the degradation of wild prey populations and wild habitat that leaves wolves with fewer alternatives. Habitat loss and fragmentation from agricultural expansion and road construction reduces the size and connectivity of wolf territories, isolating populations and reducing their genetic diversity. Prey depletion from unsustainable hunting pressure on wild ungulates reduces the food base that supports wild wolf populations. The striped hyena in Iran faces similar pressures and some additional ones. It has historically been persecuted with even less restraint than the wolf, because it lacks the wolf's cultural resonance and the complicated mixture of fear and admiration that wolves evoke in human communities, and because its role as a scavenger and occasional livestock predator has made it a target of lethal control. It is listed on CITES Appendix III and is considered near threatened globally, with population trends that are difficult to assess accurately because of the species' nocturnal, secretive habits and the lack of dedicated monitoring programs in much of its range. The irony is that in some respects, the competitive relationship between wolves and hyenas in these landscapes, the very conflict that we have been describing, may actually serve a stabilizing function in the predator community. Each species limits the other's ability to monopolize resources completely. The presence of both creates a more complex competitive landscape that in some ways is more resilient than a landscape with only one dominant predator, because the two species use the landscape in different ways and with different tools, collectively covering a wider range of ecological functions than either could alone. Wolves as hunters regulate prey populations through active predation. Hyenas as scavengers regulate the carcass landscape, processing dead animals efficiently and reducing the disease transmission risks of rotting carcasses. Both contribute to the ecological health of the systems they inhabit, and the loss of either would impoverish those systems in ways that would take years to fully manifest. There is a valley in the Zagros Mountains of western Iran in the province of Fars that I want to bring into focus as a specific place, a specific